They all seem to be dressed like, I don't know, sort of cave people or something. It's very strange. Hello, my name's Neil Price. I'm Professor of Archaeology at the University of Uppsala in Sweden. I'm a specialist in the Vikings and also the author of a recent book, The Children of Ash and Elm, A History of the Vikings. And what I'm here to do is to go through a number of Viking movies looking at what's real and what's not. Thor, 2011.
You cannot even protect your friends. How can you hope to protect the kingdom? Get into the healing room. No!
The first thing is I'd ignore all the gold and glitter. Not quite accurate. The characters here are taken from Norse mythology. Odin, his son Thor, Loki. These are all real figures that go very, very deeply into the mythology of the North. These figures are thousands of years old. One of the things I find most fun about this movie, actually, is that here in the 21st century, cinemas are packed with people watching some version, however distorted, of stories that have been told for a very, very long time.
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy! And you are an old man and a fool!
What this really captures, I think, is not so much the detail, but the idea that the Viking gods were one big squabbling family. This is something that really comes out in the mythology. These are not distant gods. They're not something remote from the human world. They're all their lives, their arguments, their adventures are something that's very much living in the Viking mind.
Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor.
One of the major props in this scene is Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. This is a real thing from the mythology, and we find them in the form of amulets, little silver pendants, all over the Viking world. And there's one that came up a few years ago that even very helpfully has a runic inscription on it that says hammer. So we really know what it is. Don't go to Thor the movie for an accurate retelling of Norse mythology, but something inspired by it and something fun, absolutely. The Vikings, 1950. Apart from the scenery, which was filmed in Norway, almost everything you see on the screen here is totally wrong. They all seem to be dressed like, I don't know, sort of cave people or something. It's very strange. And this enormous horn from no animal that ever existed. But it does get better. Now, surprisingly, this is actually pretty good. Not least you've got Kirk Douglas doing his own stunts, which was quite extraordinary at the time. This business of running along the oars, it does come from Old Norse sources. A Norwegian king in the 10th century, Olaf Tryggvason, was reported to have done this and run along the oars on the side of his ship to show his agility and his strength. So someone's done their reading. And I think this is pretty much the only Viking movie where this occurs. So full marks for that. If you ignore the medieval castle in the background, which is wrong by several hundred years, and most of the costumes, what you see here is the classic Viking funeral. And it's in large part this film that brought that into the public consciousness, the idea of sailing off into eternity on a burning longship. It's fanciful and it's certainly the Hollywood version, but this actually is remarkably close. Ship cremations, not necessarily on the water, but on land, burning a ship in a grave, is something that they really did. And there's one poem that describes a funeral exactly like this one. Viking funerals were very much tailored to the status of the people being buried. So what you see in the film is a funeral of a war leader, almost of a king. Not everyone got one of these. Not everyone got the full, burning longship. The story embedded in a funeral is something that goes all through Viking culture. A world of stories fossilized in the graves. The Vikings TV series began in 2013.
What is it?
I guess out of all the popular depictions of the Vikings, the most immediate one today is Vikings, the TV series, the drama series. I think there has been no previous depiction of the Viking Age that has reached so many people. And of course, it's engaging academics all the time. I think of the sense of life of the time that it gives is really special and really detailed. And in its aspects, in the close detail of it, the writers have paid a lot of attention to current research. So the idea of the Viking Age on the Vikings' terms, that's something that series is really, really good at. It's also something I've tried to do in my book. The Last Kingdom TV series started in 2015.
Hold the line!
What you're seeing here is one of the big battles between the invading Viking army and the defending English. The impression that it gives you of two huge forces basically just coming together is pretty accurate in terms of Viking warfare. And in terms of the tactics, what you see the English doing is trying a rough, not very good approximation of a Viking tactic, which is the shield wall, another one of the classic tropes of the Viking Age, but one that was real. This idea of multiple layers of interlocking shields to form a defensive wall that you then slam against the other side, and with little gaps to stab through and cut underneath and so on. So this idea of two opposing shield walls is a really good depiction of warfare at the time. It's close, it's brutal, it's messy, and it's horrible. The 13th Warrior, 1999.
He calls for the bones. She's an oracle.
What we see here is a meeting between Viking warriors, an Arab traveller, that's Antonio Banderas, and the locals at a place called Bulgar on the Asian steppe. I wouldn't pay very much attention to almost anything at all that's on the screen here, but the kinds of things that are going on are quite interesting, especially the different languages people are speaking. You have the Vikings speaking some kind of Old Norse. It's a sort of, in here it's kind of like Swedish and Norwegian all mixed up. A translator who speaks Latin to someone else who can translate it into, in the film it's English, but would be Arabic, talking to the central character.
He calls for men in number of the moons. 13.
So this idea of what it was actually like to communicate through several different parties in these meeting places is a really central part of the Viking Age, when they're on the move, traveling, trading, raiding, and so on. What I find quite exciting about this movie is that it's based around the single most important written source that we have from the Viking Age, which is a first-person account by the character played by Antonio Banderas. His name was Ahmad ibn Fadlan, on a mission from Baghdad up into the Asian steppe. And while he was there, in something vaguely resembling what you see on the screen, he met Scandinavians and described them. And this is the only really, really long eyewitness description of Vikings that we have. Also in this scene, you've got here she's called the Angel of Death. This is a character from Ibn Fadlan's narrative. She's a kind of sorceress, a witch, if you like. The Norse word was völva. And these are very, very important people in the Norse spiritual belief and practice. So although they kind of get almost nothing right, at the same time, there are so many real things in this scene. I think it's quite a nice one to look at and get a different kind of flavour of the Viking Age. This next one is, I'm not sure I can call it a Viking film. It's Vikings in space, sort of. Outlander, 2008. Strangely, this is also based on one of the same sources as in the 13th Warrior, the Beowulf poem, but much more closely. Although you wouldn't quite know it from watching this scene, the central character is an astronaut, but we're not going to go there. There's aliens and all kinds of things. What you've got here is another classic element of the Viking myth as it's portrayed on the screen. Viking entertainment as this kind of enormous party, and it's part of a wider stereotype of any kind of banqueting or feasting scene in every medieval movie you've ever seen, including things like Game of Thrones, where everybody's roaring drunk, sort of eating chickens with their hands, and there's a fight breaks out in the background. They didn't really dance on shields, as far as we know. So very little of the detail of this has any kind of real basis. But feasting, communal meals and communal hospitality was really important in the Viking Age. So the atmosphere of this, the feast in a great hall with a host and guests and an abundance of food and drink, is very much something that was central to the Viking idea of how things should be and how a proper lord, a host, should behave. So at least that we can give them, minus the aliens and spacemen. Valhalla Rising, 2009. This one is from, I think, pretty much the only Viking art movie ever made. This is a deeply unusual movie. It's strange, it's mystical, it's obscure. And for all those reasons, I quite like it. It gives us some of the mystery of the Viking Age, which is not just a cliche. It goes quite deeply into their religion and into the idea of the Vikings seeing the world in a special way. The central character, nameless except for his nickname, One Eye, has connections to Odin. He's reminiscent of the one-eyed god. And here at the end of the film, it brings together another really important aspect of the Viking Age, which is that in the very beginning of the years of 1000 or around then, you have the first contact between Europeans and Native Americans. In the film, it's rather obscure exactly where they are, but they're presumably somewhere off in the far west. And the people you see sort of gathered on the rocks, these are the people who the Vikings called startlingly. We would know them as First Nations or Native Americans. I think it captures the unnervingness, the disquiet of those encounters. I wouldn't look very deeply at the clothing and the paint and so on. The distance and the closeness of those meetings in almost mythical landscapes. Bear in mind the Vikings are almost sort of into a different world in their terms, is something that this film captures really well. One of the things that the enduring popularity of the Vikings embodies through all these different changing incarnations is that they still have something to say to us today. They touch the imagination of the present. To find them interesting is not the same as to find them admirable. We should be very careful about that. They were not heroes at all, but certainly people that should not be forgotten.